I've waited 60 years to say something. Starkly broke the whole thing. A little dementia. I get spells of it now and then. But I still exercise. I still go to the gym. I think that's part of it. Just keep moving. The older you get, the more that matters. In the glittering world of American entertainment, where fame often demands painful sacrifices, Dick Van Dyke stands as a living contradiction. He's remembered as the man who made us laugh, who turned pratfalls into art, who danced with Mary Poppins and flew in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He was the charming everyman of the Dick Van Dyke Show, a master of timing and grace. But behind that wide smile and ever-youthful energy lies a story many never see, a life marked by deep personal pain. He drank heavily to numb his shyness, chain-smoked 3 packs a day until his lungs gave out, and wrestled with depression so dark that he once considered ending it all. His marriage crumbled. The love of his life died slowly from illness. His granddaughter, his light, was taken by a rare, cruel syndrome. Behind that sunny grin, wounds that never really healed. And yet now, nearing 100, he still sings, still dances. There's a fire in him that refuses to go out. His very existence seems to say, laughter doesn't die. His resilience has etched his name not just into the halls of fame, but into something deeper, a living testament to a soul battered, but unbroken. How does someone walk through so many shadows, from the secrecy surrounding his birth to the illness that nearly broke him, and still leave behind a legacy so full of light? To understand that, we have to go back to a small boy carrying silent scars, a child raised in a house built on secrets. Dick Van Dyke was born on December 13, 1925, in West Plains, Missouri. But from the start, fate left its mark. His parents had conceived him out of wedlock, a heavy shame in 1920s America. To preserve the family's dignity, they falsified the records. For nearly 2 decades, Dick believed he was born in 1926. At 18, standing in a government office with his real birth certificate in hand, he learned the truth. Even his birthday had been a lie. That moment left a quiet but lasting wound. If even something as simple as his birth had been hidden from him, what in life could he ever fully trust? Not long after, the Van Dyke family moved to Danville, Illinois, an industrial town that, despite its modest size, happened to be a breeding ground for talent. In Dick's class were Donald O'Connor, future star of Singin' in the Rain, and jazz legend Bobby Short. Even Gene Hackman grew up nearby. But for Dick, childhood wasn't filled with stars. It was marked by absence. His father, Loren, a traveling salesman for the Sunshine Cookie Company, was often gone. His mother, Hazel, a stenographer, did her best to keep the family afloat. Still, home felt empty. The ache of a missing father lingered, and with it, a deep shyness took root, an invisible wall that closed him off from the world. That loneliness pushed Dick toward the church. For a while, he believed he'd become a Presbyterian minister. He taught Sunday school, read scripture, tried to live a life of good deeds. But fate had other plans. At Danville High, he joined the drama club. That's where it all shifted. On stage, the shy boy disappeared. In his place stood someone funny, alive, free. The clumsy kid who kept to himself became the one who made others laugh. The stage gave him what the church never could, a voice, and more than that, a sense of belonging. Alongside drama came a gig as a local radio announcer. His warm voice and quick wit stood out. Yet, behind the microphone, Dick still trembled. Public speaking left his hands shaking. Fear lived in him, quiet but constant. In time, alcohol would become his only escape. In 1944, as World War II raged on, Dick dropped out of high school to enlist. He didn't just want to serve. He needed to prove to himself that he was more than the timid boy from Danville. But the Army didn't agree. At 6'1" and only 135 pounds, Dick looked more like a fragile teen than a future soldier. He failed the medical exam, tried again, and failed again. At 19, it hit him hard. The military saw him as too weak to serve. But in that moment of rejection, something sparked. He wasn't giving up. On his 3rd attempt, he downed bananas, gulped water, anything to tip the scale. Just enough. That's all he needed. And finally, he made it in. It wasn't a grand victory, but it meant the world. At the very least, he'd get to wear the uniform, not return home in shame. But the war didn't send him to the front lines as he had imagined. No rifle, no foxhole. Instead, Dick was assigned to the Special Services Unit, the soldiers who didn't fight but performed. Their job was to lift morale with music, jokes, and a little song and dance. At first, he was crushed. He felt like he'd been denied a real chance to sacrifice like the others. But something shifted. On those makeshift stages, often little more than wooden planks in muddy camps, he saw something he hadn't expected. Tired soldiers laughing. Men who had just come from the trenches, their faces lined with fear and fatigue, suddenly grinning, their eyes shining, and in that moment Dick understood. Laughter could save lives too. Maybe not in the same way as bullets or bravery, but in a deeper, quieter way. It could give someone the will to keep going. During those years touring with the unit, he didn't just entertain, he grew. He faced his stage fright head-on, learned to control his voice, trained his body to move with grace, and above all, discovered that joy could be a kind of medicine. That ragtag collection of shows was his first real education. Not the kind that gives you a diploma, but the kind that shapes your soul. It taught him how to use laughter to heal. It was a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. By the time he left the military in 1946, Dick Van Dyke had earned a Good Conduct Medal, modest, yes, but to him deeply meaningful. Proof that he had served, given his all, even if it wasn't on the battlefield. Back in civilian life, the next challenge came fast, finding his place in post-war America. He tried advertising first. It was a booming field, full of buzzwords and bright promises. But almost instantly he hated it. The hollow slogans, the fake smiles, it all felt like a lie. For someone who believed comedy had to come from truth, advertising felt like wearing a mask that didn't fit. Then, a strange and wonderful thing happened. He met Phil Erickson, a mime. The two teamed up, forming a comedy duo called the Merry Mutes. Their act was built on pantomime and lip-syncing to old 78 RPM records. It was goofy, low budget, odd, but audiences loved it. They laughed until their sides hurt. What seemed silly on the surface was secretly sophisticated. Every movement timed, every facial expression measured. They toured the West Coast, then took the act to Atlanta and New Orleans. Small venues, tiny stages, cracked floors, and sticky curtains. But they were learning. That was his second school. There, in front of live audiences night after night, Van Dyke sharpened the skills that would later make him a master. Physical control, timing, rhythm, and that uncanny ability to stumble with grace. Comedy lived in his limbs now.